Yeah. Yeah, that always works for the children. Yeah. I mean, if we cover, yeah, talk about it at the very end if we hadn't got there or whatever. What happened to our, did it kick us back off of our session? Did it kick us off earlier?
Oh, I don't know.
No, that way I can. Oh, yeah, just, you can copy me. You can copy me. Go ahead and start us, Mr. Vice Chair. I forget we're still on Zoom. What? Okay, are we live? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Tuesday, September the 21st agenda session. I now call this meeting to order. Could I have a motion on the minutes, please? We have a motion on the minutes to approve with a proper second. With no objections, the minutes will stand as recorded. This afternoon, we do have a Parks and Public Works Committee, as well as a Public Safety Committee meeting. Is that correct, gentlemen? Okay. All right, this afternoon, ordinances on final reading. We do have several here zoning cases on final reading. Are there any questions or comments about any of these items, planning items on final reading? Councilwoman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't see Councilwoman Coonrod in chambers, but I think we have an alternate version for the case that we had deferred last week on first reading. And I think that is Ms. Rennick can nod her head.
Well,
is that correct?
We're not on first reading yet, sir.
We're not on first reading.
We're on final reading.
Final reading on that? That'll
No. In our agenda, we're on final readings. We're on item 5A, B, C, and D.
Yeah, we're good there.
Okay, that's.
Yeah, I'm anxious to get on.
Well, just hold on. We'll get there.
We covered that.
I promise we'll cover it.
All right. We covered that.
Okay, any questions on final reading planning items? Okay. Now, ordinance is on first reading.
No comments, sir.
Is it-
I rest my case. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
Just excited that they were able to work out a really good resolution. I want to thank RPA for stepping in on that. And Ms. Coonrod will probably tell us the same thing when she's in.
Okay, Karen, are we ready to go on this alternate version Is that the one we're going to go with today?
That was my understanding from Councilwoman Coonrod is the one she is interested in that strikes the balance between a mix of uses and what she finds, I guess, acceptable zoning balance based on the staff and planning commission recommendations. So it's been discussed with the applicant. The applicant understands that what the alternate version says.
Okay, great. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Councilman Ledford, for addressing the first reading for us. Yes, you do. Moving now down to resolutions, Madam Clerk, 7A.
A resolution authorizing the mayor or his design to enter into a second amendment and to lease the Chattanooga Area Regional Transportation Authority in substantially the form attached to a certification of the indemnification and tort liability requirements regarding the lease premises located at 17 East 12th Street, identified as tax parcel number 145EU00101.
All right, any questions or comments concerning item 7A? 7B, please.
A resolution declaring surplus approximately 1.97 acres of tax map number 135EA005.02 and authorizing the mayor of his design to enter into the donation agreement and building a construction workforce center in substantially the form attached to allow the expenses of the vacational school per sale and authorize the execution of the documents for completion of the transaction.
All right. Any questions or comments? Very well, moving to 7C, please.
A resolution confirming Mayor Kelly's reappointment of Jim Hall to the Metropolitan Airport Authority.
Still seeing no lights. D.
The resolution confirming Mayor Kelly's appointment of Monica Kinsey to the Beer and Record Board for District 7 with a term expiration of July 31st, 2024.
Moving now to human resources, 7E, please.
A resolution amending resolution number 30675 and hereby authorizing the interim chief human resources office to enter into an amendment agreement with Johnston and Associates, Inc. for third-party administration of injury and duty occupational health program claims for an initial term of 2 years and 22 days with renewal options of 3 additional 1-year periods for a total contract payment not to exceed $2,508.
I think it's 2 million. isn't it?
$2,508,501.
Thank you. Questions, comments? All right. Council, if you look at your purchasing items this afternoon, let me know if you have any questions concerning any of the purchase items for this afternoon. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, the SEI, was rebid and went through the process once again?
Yes, Councilman, when council voted to not renew the contract with SEI, we went back to them and asked them if it would be acceptable to do an extension while we do rebid the security guard contract. So they are on board with doing a 3-month extension. So we are asking council to vote for this extension so that we can maintain security services throughout the city while we do a bid process to rebid it.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chairman.
All right. Any other questions? All right. If not, Councilman Byrd.
Thank you. Hey, Brent, definitely understand the process and what we have to do. It just makes me feel sometimes that we're, kind of held hijacked by companies. If we vote no to the work that's being contracted out because our constituents or people that we talk to say that they're not doing good work or that they're not satisfied, it seems like it's sometimes an issue with us having to cater to some situations. And I've been hearing a lot of pushback about this one. And I understand and I get it because it was a good contract that we put out, but just the work wasn't up to par. Do we have any other plans to say, hey, to restructure how we do it so that we're not held at bay, or so that we're not going to them saying, hey, we're going to need 3 months of your services. We're going to kill your $600,000 contract, but 150 will give you that for 3 months if you work with us. And if they say no, then we're kind of out in the dust. And that can be with grass cutting, anything. Are we thinking of anything to work on that?
Yes, Councilman. So we do have a process in place for our departments
Okay.
to provide feedback to the purchasing department, especially when there's complaints around contractors or vendors. There were not any documented for this vendor,
Mhm.
and that's why I'm purchasing put it back onto council agenda for renewal, because there was not any negative feedback. One thing that we have talked about since this last time we went through this with you all is that we want to be able to include council in that mechanism for providing feedback so that we can get
Okay.
it documented, which
Okay.
will help us in the purchasing department when they start going through renewals. They will know, hey, there is some negative feedback that we need to address before
Gotcha.
we do anything else. So the new Oracle system makes it easier to document things
Mhm.
from the departmental level. And so we will set up a process through our constituent services for you all to be able to give us feedback that we can document. That will make it much easier and prevent us from bringing renewals to you until we've resolved issues.
Gotcha. And with that system, will the community will also have access to it? The people? No.
No, the community complaints would have to come through a department or through a council
To a
member.
councilman. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, you good, Councilman?
Yes, sir.
All right, moving to our September the 28th agenda. That'll be our 2-week agenda. Are there any questions or comments concerning our 2-week agenda? All right, if not, council under 6B. Well, yeah. Under 6B, the ordinance that I presented a couple of weeks ago in our legislative committee that eliminates the second division of city court. There were some questions that I think some council members had for our judges, maybe particularly Judge Patey. And I want to recognize Judge Patey is in the audience with us this afternoon, as well as Judge Bean. Thank you, judges, for being here this afternoon. Council, as I told you at our 2:00 strategic planning, they would be here. Are there any specific questions that you would like to address to Judge Patey, at least at this time, I think is who you had asked me to make sure she was here. Is there any specific questions that you'd like to address to her at this time in order to get ready to vote for 6A? Vice Chair Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Judge Petty, thank you very much for being here. Judge Bean, we appreciate you. I have a question that is, at the moment, I don't know that we've got data to back it up. So you guys being the experts in this would be the best to help answer. We have started a number of discussions here at this body about enforcement being an issue for the city of Chattanooga. A lot of areas that we're concerned about, we keep hearing we're not enforcing, talking about in some cases where enforcing does a little good because there's only a $50 penalty that we can waive, but it doesn't mean that we're going to just forget about enforcement altogether. And so we even earlier today discussed with the administration, here's areas of our concerns. We would like the administration to focus on stepping up enforcement to these. That's one. Two, there were also some comments made about looking at shifting some, let's say, traffic stops over and requiring certain stops, potentially even certain drug possession in small quantities to be moved to city court and requiring CPD to send those to city court as opposed to sessions court. So along those lines, if we were to move forward with, let's say, enforcement to the degree that this council would like to see it, and potentially shifting a number of, say, traffic stops and other cases like that may be going to sessions court right now over to city, could one division of court manage the additional caseload, not knowing what it would necessarily be, but just maybe drawing on some history for us as to what that might look like? Is it possible for one court to still service, or one division to still service what could potentially be quite a bit more referrals coming into the courts?
Well, it's really hard to say because you don't know what those numbers would look like. It would depend on the enforcement. And a couple of things I wanted to point out when you're thinking about eliminating the second division, over the last year and a half plus, you're looking at numbers, basically they're uncharacteristic of what we normally have in city court. You're looking at numbers in a bubble because we've been in a global pandemic. We're under the Tennessee Supreme Court, and all the courts in the state of Tennessee were shut down for periods of time during 2020 and 2021 by the Tennessee Supreme Court for in-person hearings. So we were very limited in what we could hear either by Zoom or by some other means. So we had a reduction in numbers for that. We have a reduction in numbers substantially, I feel like, because the police department is down about 100 officers. They cannot recruit and keep up with the numbers that they need for enforcement to make up for the ones that retire, that leave to go somewhere else, or for whatever reason, leave the police department. They get trained here and maybe stay a little while, and then they go somewhere else where, in the past, they were able to make more money. But if any of those factors change, if we get through COVID, if we have an increase in police numbers and resources to devote to enforcement, then those numbers could change drastically, which would require a second division, because historically we have had in prior administrations with police chiefs, we've had substantial numbers of tickets. And I think the numbers would bear it out if you looked at the fines that were imposed. You talk about a $50 fine, but when you look back over the years at the fines that have been paid in city court, they were pretty substantial amounts. City court has always basically paid for itself with two divisions. Now, it's not going to look like that for last year and probably most of this year because of the factors that I just stated. But I can't really give you a definite answer to your question, because if the numbers, if the enforcement increased dramatically and the numbers of tickets that are being issued increase dramatically, then that would probably warrant keeping a second division, or at least considering a second division.
Let me rephrase this in drawing on history. Thinking back to, say, prior to 2013, if I remember correctly, looking at the budget for 2013 and seeing the money, the revenue generated by city courts, a good portion of that was due to tickets, just traffic tickets being written. Several years later, I remember seeing that number plummet to almost disappear because we weren't writing traffic tickets to the degree that we were before. So if I rephrase that question to say, we hire a new police chief, and that new police chief has a completely different view on traffic stops, and we see those numbers escalate back to what they were pre-2014, 2015. Can one court support those numbers?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not if you go back historically.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any other questions for Judge Patey? I know when we had this discussion earlier, there were several questions. Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you so much for coming, Judge Patey. So An efficient city court system is critical to our city's public safety program. As a judge that have been, serving our city for over 20 years, how can you imagine or see that we can strengthen our city court? What does that look like to you to strengthen the city court?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by strengthen. By strengthening, meaning more enforcement. That's a possibility that would, that goes to a safety issue basically for our city. I think it's a safety issue when you look at the numbers of accidents that we have, the numbers of excessive speeding that we have. Those are and can be as tragic as anything else that's happening out there. You have a lot of fatalities with accidents and excessive speeding. If you look at those numbers, those keep going up every year. The fatalities and the traffic accidents, especially for bigger cities like Chattanooga. So I think enforcement could be a key to strengthening city court and strengthening the city of Chattanooga in general.
And then just a couple of more questions that I have, like I know we always typically go to traffic violations and things like that, but I look at it more broadly as in a criminal justice reform kind of thing, and how we can, in a public safety and public health matter. So when we're talking about like people have drug use, prostitution, mental health conditions and things like that. And if we can service them through our city court. So we're taking a broader perspective and giving them the help that they need. And we're also talking about the $50 fine. But if people are needing help and we're talking about a target group of people, which is who we say are traditionally going in and out of this system, Black people, poor white people, and Hispanics, how can, those additional wraparound services help those people to help reduce recidivism, which in turn, in my opinion, it will reduce that rate. It helps with that cycle, those barriers and eliminating those things. So from your perspective as a judge, city court judge, how does that look if we embrace those kind of charges in our city court?
Well, there are certain things that city court can hear and certain things that we can't. And I'm sure the city attorney could direct you on that, but we have to have a designation for a certain type of, if it's a misdemeanor case. The city council could enact an ordinance as long as it mirrors a state charge, but it has to be within the designation of the type of misdemeanor that a municipal court can hear. So I'm not opposed to hearing any additional cases that may help the city and may, help keep more people out of jail if they're minor violations that could be heard in city court. But again, it would have to meet the criteria for what we're allowed to hear by law. But if those can be, if ordinances could be drafted that mirror a state ordinance, a state statute, and it meets the criteria, then that's a possibility.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. We kind of touched on that earlier today. So thank you for confirming exactly the research that I presented. And then just one last question. So if we were to get rid of Division 2, now most people that I service, which is Black people, people that enter the system, they related to, and I put it in heavy quotations, evening court is what they related to. Now, according to the Webster Dictionary, evening starts at 6. So the afternoon court, we don't play with the words. But so for afternoon court, if we was to read that court, how does that affect access to people as far as, work, having to get off work to come to the door? Like, do you think that will be a barrier, create another layer to people to have access to have their court hearings?
It definitely would be a constraint, because if you only have one judge and you start a morning docket, then, like, for example, the sessions judges, they have an 8:30 docket and a 1:30 docket, and they go until they're finished. But no other judges would start at 8 or 9 o'clock and then have a 4, 5, or 6 o'clock docket. And it's never really been an evening court or a night court. Judge Bean has a 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock dockets. And So people generally would have to take off work anyway if they had to be at court at 3 or 4 or even 5 o'clock if they don't get off work until 5. And the individuals don't get to choose when they go to court or the time that they go to court. The police officers, when we're talking about traffic violations primarily, because that's what Judge Bean has on his docket. I hear animal control and ECD cases, but on his docket is strictly traffic. So when the officers use their handheld devices to enter the violation, the unit itself populates the date and the time for the person to be in court. So the officers don't even choose when the person, what day and what time they're to be in court. So there's really, whoever has to be in court would potentially have to take off anyway, even now under the present circumstances that we have with a 3, 4, and a 5 o'clock docket. So I don't think that would get better. I think it would probably get worse with one court.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
You good?
I'm
Councilwoman?
good.
Councilman Byrd?
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Judge Patey. Thank you for being here. It's been definitely a lot of talk. Thank you, Judge Bean, for being here as well, about getting rid of the second division. Well, one of the things I would like to first ask, have we considered a magistrate for the court, just in case you get overwhelmed, or if it becomes too much? Could a magistrate sit in, or could a magistrate be appointed like we have in Sessions Court?
I'm not
Yeah,
sure
sure,
about
sure.
that. That's never been presented.
Okay. So-
As far as having an afternoon
Mhm.
magistrate in the afternoon.
Okay. So,
That's-
well, let me say this. So
Uh-huh.
some of the things, like we're city court and we're the city of Chattanooga, and it's look like so often we kind of try to play it down sometime. I remember before Judge Williams, city court in the city of Chattanooga was strong. We were pretty much stronger than the county, and we just continue to kind of pick away at the city of Chattanooga, and we lose, and we'll lose our jurisdiction. We'll lose our stance. We'll lose jobs. We'll lose some great people. And I know a lot of times we're leaning toward the metro government. Some people are. I'm not. But I just want to strengthen Chattanooga and make us the force that we used to be. And it seemed like the court is one of the reasons that we need to do it, starting with city court. So I always hear it's some things that we can't do, or I hear this, we can't do that, or we probably can't do that. I don't know. And we'll reflect to the city attorney, or we'll say it's the judges, or we may even say it's the police fault, but we never get a straight answer. So, Chair, I would definitely like to see in writing the law of what we can and can't do, and say, hey, okay, so this is what it is. I'm not an attorney, so I don't know. I could look up the wrong thing and then present something crazy to you guys. So I would like to see what we can and can't do on paper, so I can say, oh, okay, I understand now. And then the second thing is, I know when Judge Williams got into court, I was working there. A lot of officers didn't want to go in front of him. And so the rookies and the other people were like, hey, it became a history. Don't write tickets over there. Or we're not going over there, because he will belittle and do officers in a bad way when they got in there, and they just got through working hard, didn't want to deal with that. So I think it became like a pattern, in a sense, to not go to city court. And I think we need to get away from that pattern. And I think that's a conversation that will come with the mayor and the new chief of police, like Councilman Ken was saying. The other thing is that the magistrate, I would definitely like to know if we can get a magistrate. So the magistrate, the law, and the time that's coming up when between Judge Bean retiring and leaving, definitely you working, and I understand that you kind of, not you, but the hours that you work, that can be adjusted. And so I don't know what hours you are to work, because it was brought up that to lessen your pay, in a sense, to say that judges should make probably 90,000. And I know you had a conversation, and just with your length of history and the criteria that you have, your salary should suffice who you are as a person and your degrees and everything of that nature. But the hours also should suffice the work that's being put in. So I would like to see and know what those hours look like and have some type of set structure to say, okay, we can work from 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock and we can knock these cases out between then. And if we knock them out, then if we need a magistrate or if we can get a magistrate, if we need another judge, then we can look at that. But I just think we need to have a conversation at all parties and not keep kicking this can around because it's hurting the city of Chattanooga as a whole. And we're kind of looking bad. So I would like to see us have better dialogue because I'm still confused on what we can and can't do.
Okay, if I could just respond on.
Of
that.
course.
If you are going to eliminate the second division, then obviously there will be more of a workload for Division 1.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
there would still be a need for an afternoon docket regardless. So there would be more, hopefully a bigger caseload and definitely more work. The need for a magistrate may not be apparent right away.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're looking at the numbers right now, like I've talked about, we're kind of in a bubble. You know, it's doable right now with an afternoon docket for one judge. But as Councilman Smith pointed out, if enforcement increased and the numbers picked back up like they were historically, that's when you might need a magistrate, maybe later.
Right.
Even beyond an afternoon docket, maybe like a night docket or something like that. But I think, you know, only time will tell what the enforcement is going to be after we get a new police chief and what that discussion is going to be like with the mayor and what their focus is going to be. I mean, it's really what it's going to boil down to.
And one other thing, Judge, I was kind of on the fence about getting rid of the second division because when I first became a councilman 4 years ago before COVID, I saw a decrease in city court. Even like before, say 2 years before when I was working down there, I was noticing that, you know, city court had a decrease. And so I think this is two parts. One part is COVID and what we're going through these couple of years. But I think the other part, it became, and this is my opinion, it became a pattern for the city officers not to write to city court, you know, as much as possible if they could help it, you know. And I still think that our city officers shouldn't have the chance. And in my history and what I know is an officer has the ability to say, I'm gonna write this ticket to city court or county court. And I feel they shouldn't have that ability. If you write a ticket and you're a city officer, it should go to city court. I just believe that. That's my opinion.
Well, I agree with you when the numbers started decreasing, not to the extent that they have because of COVID, but when we had a police chief, you know, a couple removed from what we had now, you know, his philosophy was totally different. His philosophy was, you know, focusing on other things and making all the experiences with the department a positive experience. And if you're going to enforce ordinances, it can't always be a positive experience. And so that's kind of when the decline started. But, you know, with a new chief, all of that can change. And it's just going to depend on their priorities and their discussions with the mayor when the mayor makes the appointment.
And two more things, very short, if I may. One thing is that we do electronic tickets now in city court. So I think this year and last year, probably this year only, we only have 12 tickets wrote to General Sessions Court. And all of the other tickets have been written to city court, the tickets that have been written. So a lot of tickets can't even come to General Sessions Court right now because we don't have the technology in General Sessions Court to capture the city court tickets because they're done electricity and electrical. So all tickets are done to city court now. So if you guys didn't know that. The other thing is I see during in General Sessions Court, we have different line items like a library tax, a brain injury fund. In my 30 years of working down there, I know no one who has used this brain injury fund and the library tax that goes to fund, I'm thinking the law library. I still, in city court, don't understand why we don't have different line items for city, whether it's a city library tax or whether it's a this or that. And I never get the answer for it. It's like, I don't think we can do that, but that think keeps us in a box. So I would like to know that too, why we can't create other line items to say, we can do a homeless tax or anything to just help our city out and be the city we need to be. So thank you.
Judge, can you answer the, how the different line items get in there, the tax or the, like he's mentioning?
A lot of the items are set by the state legislature. So they're in the code as far as what's permissible or what's not permissible. I don't know, since I don't deal with the cost or the line item amounts, but there is possible that you could ask for permission to add line items to the court cost. I know at times, every court has different court costs. So
Yeah.
it kind of puzzles me, how they all get the items like you're talking about, that they get appropriated for this or for that. And I don't know, since I don't deal with that. That would be a clerk question or city attorney question about trying to get the cost increased if you wanted to fund different things for the city. I just can't be more specific about that.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Ledford?
Thank you, Chairman. Judge Patey, Judge Bean, thank you for being here today. My questions are purely on an educational basis. And would you explain a little bit further to me how the cases are referred to either general sessions or the city? I think I'm picking up on it is a officer choice or a police chief choice, or even a directive from the mayor. I'm getting all kind of messages from all directions. And the reason I'm asking that question is solely based on, it feels like the heart of this conversation started with a needing to know about workload and hours worked versus a substantial pay, or the highest paid city employees, I believe, next to the coroner in the city. So I think that's where this came from. And you've cited obviously COVID as an example of a reduction in cases, but would you explain that a little bit further on where the citations go and whose choice is that?
It generally is the officer's decision where to cite someone. If it's a city ordinance violation and it's strictly something that they can cite to the city, I would suspect generally they would do that, especially as Councilman Byrd said, with the handheld units. We are electronically set up for that. Sessions Court is not set up for that. If they cite to Sessions Court, it would be probably because there's an additional charge that is not compatible with city court jurisdiction.
Okay.
It could be a state violation. It could be a charge that would be a state violation that we can't hear. And so there could be a city ordinance that could go along with that, but because they're having to charge on a state charge, they just take everything to Sessions Court. And those have to be handwritten out citations, is my understanding. Mm-hmm. So if they're going to cite someone to Sessions Court, the officer has to handwrite out the citations and give it to the person, or they make an arrest right on the spot. If it's a chargeable arrest where they're going to take the person to jail, then that would definitely be a state charge that they would be arresting someone on, and that would go to Sessions Court. So it's really just difference in jurisdiction, but it is the officer's discretion in most instances how they want to charge the person. They can charge them with everything, or they could, pick and choose things that they do want to cite them for, or charge them with, or arrest them for. So it really depends on the officer.
So would it be fair to characterize that it's not really the officer's choice per se, it's the officer's choice in what charges are made as to whether or not it goes to A or B? Is that accurate?
Well, sometimes it would not be their choice if they're going to make an arrest or they're going to charge somebody with a state offense. That has to go to Sessions Court. But they do have a choice if it's a speeding ticket. Mm-hmm. They can choose whether to send that speeding ticket to Sessions Court or to City Court, because they can cite it under a TCA section for Sessions Court as a state violation, or they can cite it under a city ordinance violation and send it to City Court. So there are a number of traffic violations that they could choose to go either way. So that's where they have the discretion in the traffic
Okay.
arena.
Does a city ordinance change, direct the police department to write a quote unquote speeding ticket that automatically goes to city court and that decision is changed by city ordinance?
I'm not sure.
I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to understand better. Is it a real decision or is it a decision based on the charges? And I think I've understood that it depends on the charges. There's some things you can't hear.
Right.
So that's not an option to go to city court, but there is an option to go to city court if it's just give me one example so I can be more accurate.
It's like a speeding ticket.
Okay, speeding ticket, that is a choice, whether it can go to sessions or city. But a speeding ticket combined with, give me another, that would go to sessions.
Well, speeding with the DUI
Speeding with a DUI would go,
to
is
sessions.
not an option for you.
Right.
So by ordinance, can that be changed to move speeding tickets into city court? And because right now you have the option to do both. Am I correct?
That would
And-
really be, that would really be.
And Madam Attorney, please feel free to jump in.
Sure. I want to follow up with Councilman Byrd a bit to make sure I understand what the question is. So the city court has jurisdiction to enforce those things that are in the ordinance, up to a $50 fine. There are also certain Class C misdemeanors that are written by the state law
Mhm.
that we are allowed to mirror in our city code.
Okay.
So the first question is, are there, in my opinion, I think, the question is first, are there Class C misdemeanors that we could cite, that we could put into our ordinances that are not currently there to give officers more opportunities to cite to city? Is that the question?
Mhm.
Okay. The second would be, so I think to answer your question, if someone gets picked up for speeding and DUI sessions, they cannot take those away because then you're basically having two trials out of the same set of facts. But by a matter of directive, a police chief could say, if you are able to cite this to city court, do so. So in the event that there's the overlap where we have a mirrored ordinance, the chief could say, send them to city court. The third option is one that's been discussed, and that would be to resume general sessions court jurisdiction. And I wanted to make sure that that was not the question that Mr. Byrd was asking, because that's a completely different inquiry that I think we've already gotten past.
That's a tremendous process according to TCA. I've looked at it and quite frankly, I don't think it would ever.
It's
it would
not
ever
politically
gain- It
viable.
would ever gain traction.
It was
It's an-
written by the state to make sure that we don't regain
I
the
agree with you
jurisdiction.
100%. Yeah.
So
It's an
what I want to
immense
make sure
process.
I'm not doing is giving you the wrong piece of research.
Say it again.
Is what you're asking, how we can maximize the violations that can be cited to city court under our current jurisdiction,
Hmm.
rather than can we increase to general sessions jurisdiction where we could hear all misdemeanors and
Mhm. I do know that several years ago, we lost our jurisdiction as a city,
Mhm.
you know, and I think we can definitely use the assumption that we can't get it back without doing nothing. Or we can work on trying to get it back to strengthen our city, to make sure that our city court judges have the things that they need to work.
I'm
And-
sorry, I think I was unclear.
Okay.
There are two options to strengthen the city court. The first option is to ensure that any state criminal code that is eligible to be heard by a municipal court pursuant to Title 16, 18, 302, they
Mhm.
spell out which Class C misdemeanors can be heard. That's the first. And
We need
I
to hear
think
that.
that's the viable way to strengthen the court.
Facts.
Yes, so
Yes.
I'm ready to do that research. I have already completed the research on the viability of regaining general sessions court jurisdiction.
Mhm.
So if that's what you're asking, I can just shoot you that memo that's been done.
Okay. I'd love to see it. I mean, that's cool. I would like to definitely
Do
see.
you understand the distinction that?
Of course,
That
of
one,
course.
yeah, there are two
And-
ways to strengthen and they're not the
Right.
same.
I like the first way.
Mhm.
That's the low hanging fruit that we can grab a hold to. So I like that. That's something good. The other one is it will take work, and I understand we're not there yet. And whatever situation may be, I don't know. I would like to see the memo and see what's going on, because a lot of times when people are asking us about city court and what's going on and people ready to take over city court, I have no answer, or I have no answer about jurisdiction. I just hear a lot of, we can't do that, or we're not going to be able to do that. And so-
Councilman Byrd, hold,
I just want to see it.
I was trying to make sure the city attorney had your question that
Mhm.
she could answer.
Yeah, she answered. the
But
first
yeah,
one.
okay. Councilman Ledford's still
Yeah, go ahead.
active. I just want to make sure
Thank
we
you,
can come back to you.
I
if you
respect it.
got other things to say.
I appreciate that, but I definitely want to hear from my colleagues, especially those who've had experience with the court system.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to gain knowledge as to why the workload, even past COVID, would be lightened and what we could do to strengthen our court system. I'm just trying to understand why and where those choices are made in the directive. So I think you've helped me tremendously in understanding there's additional charges that would disqualify it going to city court. So thank you for that. My next question, and then I will be finished, Chairman, is can you explain a little bit more on the referral to the AHJ and how that it works now and to the administrative hearing judge? And then is it used to its full effectiveness in your opinion? Or could we do something from this body to help strengthen that? And I'll stop there, but I want to make sure people who are listening to us that we're not trying, this council is not trying to find ways to place additional charges on the public.
Yeah.
That's not our goal, just to fill your dockets. That is not our goal. Our goal is to figure out how to make, I think, the judicial system in the city do its best for the citizens of Chattanooga and from a taxpayer perspective.
Well, it's my understanding that the administrative hearing officer is only hearing cases that deal with property issues. And I think it's limited to that by statute as well. But when the ordinance was enacted, I think there was maybe a greater hope that it would be more successful than it has been. I don't know how many cases right now are being taken to administrative hearing officer. From the last time I spoke with one of the city attorneys, I don't think it's been very many.
Right.
And I don't think it's been as successful as the council had hoped in finding people more. I think you find that you can find people more, but you can't make them pay.
Mhm.
You can find somebody $500, but that doesn't mean they're going to pay. So there have been some fines like that imposed. I don't think there's been a success with that. Again, that the council maybe hoped. So I don't know numbers. I don't know figures because I don't deal with that. But I'm sure they would be available through the hearing officer as far as how many cases have been heard this year, last year, and how much money's been collected. But I don't think it's been a great number. If that answers your question, I don't know that it's being utilized
Effectively.
effectively,
Yes,
or
ma'am.
to the extent that maybe it was planned initially.
That was kind of my thinking, and I thank you for verifying that. Chairman, that's all I have for
Thank you.
now. I appreciate the education.
Councilwoman Dotley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I just have a few basic operational questions. What are the hours of the city court, and then what hours do each judge work?
Well, it varies. I have a docket every day I have an 8, 9, 10 o'clock docket. Judge Bean has 3, 4, and 5 o'clock docket. The numbers on those dockets vary depending. We have no control over the numbers that come in on tickets. They're controlled by the officers or by the inspectors or by the animal services officers that set the cases. My Thursday dockets, where I have animal and environmental dockets, sometimes go until 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right before he's getting ready to start his docket in the afternoon. You might spend anywhere from 4 to 5 hours, possibly a day in court, maybe less. But then there are also obligations outside of court to do paperwork that you have to do, signing warrants, signing paperwork. We have to review correspondence that people send in to us regarding tickets because we don't use a district attorney in our court. So anybody that sends in a letter, we have to review the letters that come in. So there are other, you have meetings. There are other obligations you have. So not all of your time for any judge, for that matter, is going to be spent in court. So it just varies from day to day, depending on the numbers of cases that we have and what we have as far as after court. But that's the general time frame is 8, 9, 10 o'clock docket in court. And you just go until you're finished with the dockets, and then Judge Bean start at 3, 4, and 5.
Okay. And then what is your caseload for this week? Like the number of cases that you have or you both have this week?
I couldn't give you a specific number. I don't know exactly. I mean, I would say they range anywhere from, mine probably range in a week from, I'm guessing 400 to 600 or 700 in the week.
Cases per week?
Mhm.
Okay. And then finally, how many staff work in the city court offices?
Judge Bean and I each have a court administrator and 2 court officers each.
Okay.
And
All right.
then all the other employees that work with us in court are employees of the city court clerk's office. So we each have a bench clerk, we each have a cashier that work in the court when we're in session, but they're employed by the city court clerk's office.
Okay. And I guess this is my last question about the cases. And how many cases did you have yesterday?
I'm really not sure. I'm guessing maybe 75. I mean, I don't know by numbers. And, those are numbers, not everybody shows up, for cases that are set. So I can give you a number, but that doesn't mean that all those people are going to come to court either. So it's hard to, be specific. I can give you a number, but that doesn't mean all those people came to court.
Okay. Thank you, Judge Page.
Is that it? Councilwoman Hill?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Judge Patey. Thank you, Judge Bean, for being here. So for me, this definitely began simply as a conversation about workload and efficiency for taxpayer dollars. And so I had some questions very similar to Councilwoman Dotley and Councilman Ledford, but now something's not quite adding up. Something's not making sense for me. So Judge Patey and Judge Bean, would you all typically have about the same amount of work, or do one of you
No.
have more or less?
I've usually always had a heavier docket because I have the first and third shift officers that come to the morning docket. Judge Bean has a second shift officers. So my dockets have always generally been more. In addition to that, for a number of years, I guess I've heard the animal dockets and the environmental dockets, and those are pretty substantial dockets as well. And those are only on my dockets.
Okay, so Chairman Henderson provided us with a list of Judge Bean's dockets by year. And I want to make sure that we're using the same count. So you estimate, Judge Patey, that you see between 400 and 600 cases a week. And I have that in 2020, Judge Bean saw 422 cases total.
Okay, I'm not sure where those numbers are coming from, but remember again, in 2020, we were shut down for
Right, yeah.
substantial amounts of time by the Tennessee Supreme Court. So those numbers are not going to be accurate. at
Right.
all.
Well, in 2019, it was 318 cases. So it was fewer than in 2020.
No, that's not accurate. I'll let him respond. I'm not
Okay.
sure where those numbers are coming from, but that's not for a whole year.
No, I'll probably hear that in a month. But I want to go into one thing about the pay, the history of that. Of course, I've been there for 22 years. The way that came about was that Judge Williams came in front of the city council because he was getting less pay than Sessions Court and Circuit Court and criminal pay and criminal court, and he wanted equal pay. And the council approved the equal pay. Now, there's no court that is up there 8 hours a day, every day. Sessions Court, they've got 5 judges. They're not up there like that. Circuit Court, if they have divorce cases or something, they'll be there. If they're not, then they'll be off sometimes those days. So it's an equal pay situation with the other judges, all the judges in this county, as far as Hamilton County and city of Chattanooga. Now, I did want to, it's a little complicated, but I wanted to mention about the cases that go to Sessions Court. I don't think any traffic cases that are solely traffic go to Sessions Court. They might if they have a DUI or something with them, but I don't think the other way they do. The way that came about was when Judge Williams was the judge, he was fining people more than the $50. The Davis case was taken to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that he did not have state jurisdiction anymore. That's what started the city for not having state jurisdiction. So it's the issue of Sessions Court has the state jurisdiction and the city has the municipal jurisdiction. And the way Judge Patey came up, I used to handle the animal control, used to handle some of the environmental, but because of overtime situations, they put them all down in Judge Patey's court. And because of that, my docket is a lot less. And now obviously it's a lot less. And it is a lot because the officers are down 100. They're just not writing many tickets. Chief Fletcher back didn't want to write a lot of tickets. That started it down, but I don't know where those figures came from. I write a lot more. I mean, I try a lot more cases than-
I can give you some insight on that. Judge, you gave me your clerk's contact information, and I called her and asked her to give me your caseload over the past several years. Now, unless she misunderstood what I was asking for, she understood I wanted caseloads by year, and I got those numbers from your clerk.
Yeah, well, that was misunderstanding some way because that's definitely not correct.
Well,
Because we've got, so it was interesting, Councilman Smith's questions about, 2013. But what I saw is in this list, it's been interesting to hear about, the leadership at the police department and different focus areas probably aligned with a mayor's focus area. But 2014, we've got 331 cases. 2015, we've got 447. The max number of cases that I see on this document, 2016, 582. And after that, it goes down. Next closest is 552. So if these aren't accurate, it would certainly be helpful to get accurate numbers for both divisions, because that's critical to us making our decisions to see this historic caseload.
That would be the clerk's office rather than my court administrator probably that would do that. I would think
I don't know. You gave me a contact information, and maybe it was clerk. I mean, I can go back through my emails.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say
Well,
it's integral to my decision.
But if it's
To have
not
this
the right
information.
information, we do need the right information.
Well, I've talked with you and I've talked with Councilman Byrd and several, and I've told them that my dockets are very, very light at this point. That's one of the reasons I'm retiring. I don't want to make a lot if I'm not working, but I'm there every day. I'm ready for cases. It's just that they're not coming up. The cases I hear now are mainly accident cases. I do get some speeding tickets, but they don't write a lot of speeding tickets. And it's very frustrating because I'm like you, when I go out here on the highway, I see people coming by 80, 90 miles an hour. And I wish there were more tickets written, but I think it is a lot due to the fact that the police force right now has lost a lot of the officers and they just don't have the capability at this time.
Well, so I guess for me, as I think about this conversation, it is a conversation about workload and having a quality court experience for anybody that needs to work with the court, for that to be an efficient process for them and for our community to know that we're enforcing our laws on a consistent, fair, and timely basis. Coming into a conversation about really what is the what is Mayor Kelly's vision for what our next police chief's focus area will be? With where they put their emphasis, that I feel like we're not really at a place to have that conversation be entered into this decision. And I agree, like, as we've talked, what's the why of the existence of our courts? It's not to make money, and it's not to add complexity for people to have to go one place and go another. So if you all would work with Chairman Henderson to get us some accurate information on caseload and actual people that come through the court. Because you said, Judge Patey, that, maybe you had 75 cases yesterday, but that's not actually how many people show up to court. So that would be helpful to know, like, how many people are actually in the building, and how many documents is a clerk or a cashier processing. How many people do we need to process a small docket? So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Judge Bean, while you're there, I'm curious, you got some cases today, correct?
I do.
How many cases do you have today?
I don't have many. I think probably 3 or 4 at 5. They're all accident cases.
Okay. So I think when I talked to you last week, you had approximately about 2 a day, correct? I mean, does that sound about right? I mean,
Oh, no.
it just seems like, and we've had conversations before about your workload, and part of the reason I brought this legislation forward is because of the workload.
Yeah, definitely.
And now what I'm hearing is it seems like we're trying to create some work to justify 2 courts. And if we want to do that, that's fine. If we want to write more tickets, I mean, I don't understand why we don't emphasize more of the lights on program that the police department is doing now. Instead of writing tickets, they're giving vouchers for people with tail lights out. And I mean, I can't believe we're up here having a discussion saying we want to create more work for the courts and write more tickets and citations. But I mean, if that's what this council wants to do, I mean, we can go that direction. It just seemed like to me that this whole discussion started because the caseloads have let up. We lost the Sessions Court jurisdictions. And then the caseloads obviously dropped off after that because we weren't able to hear those types of cases. Then you factor in a police chief that is trying to, I guess, perhaps write fewer citations. And at some point the court cases do drop off. I mean, I do want to know, and I need to go back, I guess, and make contact with this individual and maybe have a conversation with you, make sure I got a hold of the right person, because that's the numbers they sent me. And if it's not the right numbers, we certainly need to know that. If there's a need for 2 divisions, we need to keep 2 divisions. This is what I'm trying to get to the bottom of. Do we need 2 divisions or not? And for 8 years I've been up here, we've been talking about doing away with a division. And now I've brought this forward and now we want to keep it.
Well,
And that's good. That's all right. We just, you need to cut bait or fish at this point.
Well, no question that I think Judge Patey has a full docket. She handles animal control, she handles environmental court, and she handles accidents and everything. Now, the 2nd division, I have not said that you should keep it. That's going to be up to you, but it is a very light docket. It costs you $400,000 or $500,000 a year. So it's just something you need to look at. There was a couple of questions about, why don't we take over some drug cases or something? Well, we've lost state jurisdiction. We cannot handle drug cases. We cannot handle DUI cases. We can handle cases that involve driving, and we can handle public intoxication, things of those natures. So you just probably need to look into that. But at any rate, that's it. I did want to say one thing. I happened to see Mayor Corker over at Ed Johnson Memorial, and we were talking about city court. And I was telling him, I said, Mayor, I've always had good relationships with all the councils and with you too. And I have had good relationships with this council. And I wanted to thank all the council, not just this one, but the ones in the the history that I've been there with. They've always been very cooperative, and I've tried to be cooperative with them. And I thank each of you for that.
Thank you. I do have one, well, I got two lights now. Councilman Byrd?
It's just to clarify, Chair, definitely my conversation was not to increase more tickets or to put any of our citizens in harm's way or have them pay more money. I think my conversation was to say that if we are writing tickets, City of Chattanooga officers are writing tickets, I would like for our City of Chattanooga officers to write those tickets to Chattanooga, if they can, to the city court. I do understand that Division 2 is not functioning on the level we would like to see it. So I do understand with the legislation that you presented on getting rid of the second division. So I'm okay with that. And I'm understanding that. The other thing is you mentioned if you get a tail light and you get a voucher for your tail light, we need to be careful with that too, because you get pulled over with a gun, you get a tail light and they smell marijuana, or you have marijuana in the car, or a gun. An attorney can rip that apart, because one other thing too, that what's the probable cause of you pulling them over? Because that tail light case has been dismissed or it was never brought to the courts because I gave you a voucher. So why did you pull them over? So that's another conversation that we need to also look at. But at the end of the day, I do understand that we do need to strengthen our city court. And right now, I'm kind of embarrassed about how we look and what's going on with city court and even us as a city. So I would like to see us strengthen our conversations and the way we work together. That's where I'm at.
Thank you. Councilman Ledford?
One last question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Judge Bean, you've indicated that you feel like, and you would know that your cases are light and that you feel like you're not pulling your weight, I think, is what one of the reasons that if I read you, if that's correct. Now I'm going to give you a chance to say yes or no and not put words in your mouth, but would that be an assumption that would be kind of correct?
That's correct. My court officer did mention too, because I talked about retiring, and he said, well, you need to open up your billfold and pull out your driver's license and see your date of birth and decide that too.
Sure.
And that was one of the issues that I thought about, that maybe
Sure.
I
And my,
better retire. But it is very light right now. There's no question about that.
okay. And my second question, and this is, I want to make sure that this is a fair question to Judge Patey. And that is, if those additional cases, is it fair to say that if there was no Division 2, those cases would go to Division 1? And it was stated from this dais, and I want to give you a chance in front of this dais to answer in your own words. Are you unwilling to address those cases or to take those on as a city court judge?
Well, I'm certainly willing to take on any cases that
Okay.
come before city court. I've always done that. And again, the judges don't have the discretion on which cases come to city court or how many come to city court. We deal with what we get. And so I've always been willing to deal with what I get,
Okay.
no matter whether it's first shift, second shift, third shift officers, whatever it may be. I'm certainly willing to take whatever comes to city court.
Thank you. I wanted to hear those words from you exactly. So I appreciate you, those words. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you. Councilwoman Coonrod?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure, as well as what Councilman Byrd mentioned to you, that I'm not trying to have more people go to city court, like you saying, write citations, send them here, send them here. But my thing is that we keep focusing on traffic court. For me, it's more than just traffic court, and it's about addressing our recidivism rates and it's criminal justice reform. If I've made that clear, I think. So I in no way want people that's watching to think by your words like I'm pushing for something different. I think that our city court can address these key concerns, and as Judge Patey has already stated, is that we can, when it comes to Class C misdemeanors and according to the TCA code that I already talked about earlier, as long as it's mirroring, that we can have those going to city court. Now, one thing that the council does and supposed to do as our job is legislate. So we therefore don't have to wait on the mayor to say, to create, or his staff to create legislation for us. It's our job to do that. Now, what we have been doing great at is working with our administration together. So I don't want to mislead people to think, that our job is waiting on the mayor to tell us what to do. That's not the job. That's not the way that this setup goes.
Good
And
point.
so we have to make sure we're careful with that. But I did want to address that when he talked, Judge Bean, you mentioned about the city court to hear drug cases. No, some drug cases, yeah, they need to go to the appropriate place, which is general sessions. But what I'm talking about is simple possession. Simple possession, which is those minor, low-level drug charges of 0.14 gram of a joint or anything in that matter. Now, we may have to think about if we want to talk about just sending marijuana to city court versus a bag of heroin or opium. We can get into that later, but those things, when we look at that, are punitive, it's criminalized when a lot of people just, and it's based on research and what the state TCA code says, Councilwoman Burrs, that I'm stating. So though we need to really take a careful look at that. And that's what I'm pushing for, is how we could decriminalize our system and actually help the citizens that we serve. And that's what we should all be concerned about.
Thank you. We do have two committees that we need to get into today. Councilman Hester, I'm going to take your question and comment, and then we're going to move on.
First of all, I want to thank you all for being here, Judge Petty and Judge Bean. And thank you for your historical perspective on why the cases went down. I had a question concerning that, but you answered that question for me. Thank you, Judge Bean. Appreciate it. That's all I would say.
Thank you. Okay, Councilwoman Burrs just notified me that she had been trying to make a comment. Since she hasn't had any input into this session, Councilwoman Burrs.
Thank you. This has been a fascinating conversation. One of the basic things I learned in law school is that law is not moral, it's legal, and that we need to follow the legal process. And you guys have done a great job doing that. I count on you as my friends, and I think you've done a wonderful job. I think the issue here has to do with things that can be done legally and things that can't be done legally, although sometimes it has bad or unfortunate repercussions with people. Mr. Chair, I would like a definitive legal opinion in writing from the city attorney. City court certainly can address some things like traffic, things that have to do with traffic and maybe intoxication. But when it comes to simple possession, those sorts of things, you can't. And these are issues that I think are, the discussion is more with our state legislature than some of the we wish things here. Our job is legislation, except our legislation can't override the state legislature. Let me ask you something just really quickly. If we could do all that we could do, which isn't much more than you're doing now, even though some people would like it to be that way. Is one court sufficient because of the no-shows?
At this
If you
time,
look at it right now, yes.
Okay, and I know COVID has made a difference. I know that.
I wanted to give just one more history situation. When Judge Williams became judge, Judge Taylor was a judge too, and they had two judges for the city. When
Right.
Judge Taylor retired, the city council did away with that second division. And then when I first started, I got appointed to the second division, and I was working like till 12 o'clock at night. The cases had backed up that long, and they evolved down And part of that was that Davis case I mentioned when we
Sure.
lost state jurisdiction. Because if you don't have state jurisdiction, if we had state and city jurisdiction, we would, we'd have all kinds of cases, but,
Well, right now, you don't have state
That's
and
right.
city jurisdiction. And the only way for you to have state and city jurisdiction is if the state says, hey, we're giving it back to you. I get that. I'm just curious, if you were handling all the things that you can handle, even some of the intoxication stuff or the speeding stuff or this sort of stuff that maybe you're not handling as much now. Do you need two divisions? Or if we were to research the magistrate thing, is it some combination of things? In other words, do we need to be a little more creative than just from what I'm hearing, and I've got a great deal of respect for you guys. What do you think?
I think right now, there's probably not a need because of the numbers, just being frank.
Yeah, I get that. I don't think there's a need.
But as things change, and I've looked at the ordinance, and there's a provision in there that it could be modified at some point in the future if necessary, and that may be the time that you consider a magistrate, depending on
Yeah.
how the numbers go and how quickly they go back to the way they were, if that ever happens. I mean, who knows? We don't have a crystal ball, so nobody knows what's going to happen. But I think right now, there's not a need. But in the
Okay.
future, I can't say that there may not be. But as long as there's some way to address that in the future, whether it's by a magistrate or whether it's by another judge, then I think you have that covered as long as you've got that provision in the ordinance.
Your Honor, you and I are on the same page. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Judge-
Just to add that on the magistrates, you could have one for, say, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in the afternoon trying traffic cases. You wouldn't have to pay them the same salary you do the regular judge, things along those lines.
Judges, thank you for being here today. This has certainly been a lively discussion. Thank you. All right, council, we are not quite through our agenda as of yet. Looking at our future considerations. Anything on future considerations that we need to address at this time? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands at this time. So this does cover all of our agenda items. Is there anything else that needs to come before this council before we go to committee? All right, I think the first committee that we have up is Parks and Public Works. So at this time, I'm going to turn the chair over to Councilman Hester.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome to Parks and Public Works. I see Mr. Stone's here.
Good afternoon.
Can we approve the minutes? I see it. Thank you. We have a final reading ordinance. Can you read E and F, please? 5E and F. Madam Clerk.
Item E, an ordinance closing and abandoning an unopened alley in the 1400 block of Cemetery Avenue as detailed on the attached map subject to certain conditions. Item F, an ordinance closing and abandoning an unopened alley in the 2000 block of Museum Street as detailed on the attached map subject to certain conditions.
I see no hands. 7G, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to approve change order number 1 for Thomas Brothers Construction Company, Inc. of Hickson, Tennessee for contract number R15002-202 Sturkey Farms Phase 2 for an increased amount of $42,619.40 plus a new contingency amount of $20,000 for a revised contract amount of $310,139.95.
H, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to apply for and, if awarded, accept a grant from the Lyndhurst Foundation for the expansion of the Bike Chattanooga Bicycle Transit System electric bicycle fleet in the amount of $100,000.
Keep no hands. Aye, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to enter into an agreement with Tally Construction Company, Inc. relative to contract number T 21019-201 for construction services associated with citywide resurfacing in the amount of $18,018,651.05 with a contingency amount of $1,801,865.11 for a total amount of $19,820,516.16, subject to appropriation of funds.
Okay, thank you. I see no hands. That's all for the Parks and Public Works Committee. Thank you, Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Mr.
Public Safety. Public Safety is not here. Okay. Let's give it just 1 minute.
Mr. Chair, we got one more for next week. It's at the end. Next week.
Okay, I don't see that one.
Page 5.
Okay, next week under Public Works, we have a 7I. Sorry about that. Can you read that, Madam Clerk?
Resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to renew blanket purchase order number 545869 with ADS LLC for the final 1-year renewal period for sewer line flow monitoring and rain gauge services to comply with consent decree requirements for an amount not to exceed $1.4 million.
Can I see no hands? Thank you again, Madam Clerk. Mr. Stone?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We're going to adjourn this to Public Safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Welcome to Public Safety. May I have approval of the minutes? Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you read under Resolution 7F, please?
A resolution authorizing the Chattanooga Police Department to apply for and if awarded, accept fiscal year 2022 Eastern Tennessee Project Safe Neighborhood PSN grant from the State of Tennessee Office of Criminal Justice Program for a grant period beginning November 1, 2021 through June 30, 2023 in the amount of $139,629.
Okay, seeing no questions.
Mr.
Under-
Chairman. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sir, Brent.
We've been notified that the grant amount will now be less than $25,000. Therefore, we are asking this to be withdrawn from the agenda,
Yes, sir.
which I believe will need to be done from the floor this evening.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We will take care of that. I will take care of that.
Thank
all
you.
right. Thank you, sir. All right, resolutions 7H, please.
A resolution authorizing the chief of the Chattanooga Police Department to enter into a contract with Axon Enterprise, Inc. for body worn cameras, tasers, in-car cameras, interview room storage and maintenance over a 5-year term from October 1, 2021 through September 30, 2026, based upon Sourcewell contract number 010720AXN to be paid in annual payments of $1,403,999.79 for a total amount of $7,019,998.95.
Awesome. Seeing no questions. All right, let's get into the amendment of curfew legislation. That legislation was brought forth by Councilwoman Coonrod. Would you like to start off by speaking with us about that, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Chair. So I brought this legislation forward to be amended from ages 17 and under and to change the times. Simply because of the recent activities that have been taking place. And also, it's a public safety issue when you think about it. Everything else will stay the same in the ordinance. It's just changing the hours that our children need to be in the house. Now, it was some concern about our parks because the curfew for the parks is actually at 10:30 at night. But 10:30 at night, our kids should be at home resting, preparing for bed, so they can have a better day and operate more efficiently at school the next day. So that's coming from a socio-emotional standpoint with that. And then also it gives our parents, like they have to start being responsible for our kids, their kids. So also as part of the legislation in the charter, that it states that the police will take the kid to, and a lot of concern have come up about the police being held, hostage with the kid, but they will take them to the parent, so the parent can assume responsibility. And at that point, it's up to the parent to say, take them to juvenile if they want to keep the kid. But then also past that if there's some things, if the parent don't want to assume responsibility, then of course the city court judge can intervene at that point to look at things that are happening within that home. That, the kid may not feel safe to be at home or whatever. Again, that comes with making sure that we can give the parent or the home in a holistic way to give them the wraparound services that they need. But kids shouldn't be outside at 11 o'clock at night or at midnight. They should be at home with their parents in a safe environment. And that's the point of bringing this legislation forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chair. I think it's a wonderful piece. Do we have any questions from the floor? Councilman Darren Lefford.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions in regards to this proposed legislation change. The first one's a comment, and that is, thank you, Councilwoman Coonrod, for recognizing the strength of parents, responsibility of parents, and not being afraid to talk about it. I appreciate that very much. The second part is, if this were to change, how do we intend to promote this via the community? How do we let people know that they are in violation or curfew has changed? Do we have any mechanisms in place? Does the Chattanooga Police Department have any way to actually advise people that this is a change? I mean, we can let the press put it in a headline, hope that it gets right, but I don't know. And that's not going to be enough. In order for it to have impact, I would really have to ask that question and figure out how we're going to get that message out. But I applaud you for thinking about families and holding parents accountable for the kids. I think that's right on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. To Councilman Lefford's question, Chief Tucker, do we have mechanisms in place if this legislation was to pass to get it out to the parents, maybe through the school system, partnering with the school board, partnering with local community televisions for the police department to do that?
I could see a number of venues to do that in. Yes, there's social media, there's school system, our CPIC meetings with neighborhoods and communities. We have a national night out coming in, although it may be scaled back due to the COVID situation we're in. Also partnering with juvenile court.
Okay.
Judge Filial has always been an open minded person, willing to listen and help in any way whenever we've asked. So certainly we could look at that.
All right, thank you, sir. You might want to hang out for a little while. This might be around your
Can I add
Councilman.
one- can I add one?
Oh,
one
yes,
note to
sir.
that,
Go ahead.
Chairman, if you
I
don't mind?
apologize, but
We may need to think about also if this were to pass a kind of a grace period to let folks know time for that information to get out into the community.
yes, sir.
Thank
Great, great point. Great point. Councilman Ken Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious. I've got a few questions, but my main one is anyone aware of why it is currently 17 and under and why it is currently 11 o'clock?
With,
I thought we were changing 17 to 16 and 11 to 10. Oh.
16 and 17.
I thought we were moving it. We're making it older.
17 and down.
7. Okay. Sorry. I guess I was saying the same thing. I was saying it backwards. Okay. Sorry.
Mhm.
So it is 17 and under. So what we're doing is we're capturing 16-year-olds when before we were only capturing 15 and down. Is that right? Is that saying it correctly?
Mhm.
Is that saying it correctly, Councilwoman? Okay. Sorry, I stated that incorrectly. Do we know why it is currently the way it is, meaning 16-year-olds are not part of the curfew? Anybody?
I think our city code right now kind of mirrors state law, which that's the way they determined it. So I really don't have an answer as to why that is.
And then the 11 PM, same thing. We're not really sure. Okay, so this is one of those cases of unintended consequences I'm worried about. If I had to guess, I would say the reason 16-year-olds are not currently included is because they can drive. It's also because they can be working at nighttime. The reason it's probably 11 o'clock is most restaurants close at 11 o'clock. There's plenty of 16-year-olds that I know personally that work at restaurants until 11 o'clock at night. This means that they no longer can work. If they're pulled over on their way home, they now have to be taken somewhere by the police if they are by themselves in their car. Therefore, they would be violating curfew. So why are you shaking your head? Am I reading the legislation wrong?
Yes.
Please. Oh, good. Thank you.
The
'Cause I was worried
ordinance,
about that. Please
the
correct
ordinance
me.
already has 10 million exceptions for the curfew. So if you're in a car or with your guardian or coming to or from work or in an emergency or all those things you just stated are not curfew violations.
Good, because
It's
all I had in front
it's
of
a
me was this
laundry
little
list.
snippet right here, and none of that was in there.
All that this does is change the age to a year older and change the hour to an hour earlier, but all of the exceptions would still apply.
So somebody that is babysitting, working, gets pulled over on the way home, that's 16 years
Exercising their
old,
First Amendment rights, everything.
all of it is still good. So in what case does this apply?
I would say,
Just,
Councilman Ken,
Yeah, I would say, things of where they're loitering or just out and
Right.
about with no.
Like
purpose.
and like the issues, I think a big part of this, Councilman, was that downtown, a lot of that, especially around the Buffalo Wild Wings area and the bridge, a lot of those kids that are hanging out down there, we have had several gunshots fired. We have had several fights. And a lot of times the police, when they approach and they're talking to the kids, the kids start to scatter. And if you could get a kid and talk to him and realize at that time that this kid is 16 years old, downtown or any other community other than downtown, unattended by an adult, I think that just gives our officers a leg to stand on. I think that was my understanding of the legislation.
So predominantly in a loitering situation. Now, if you're under
Yeah, I mean, parks.
17 instead of under
you know,
16.
Things where there's not a legitimate reason for being out at night.
Is that common, Chief?
For kids to be out at night?
Or to say if you're talking to a group of kids and they happen to be 16, so it's okay? I mean, is this, I now understand the intent. So I do like that. I'm just wondering, what are the likelihoods that changing this by 1 year, do you feel, for what your experience is, that will help?
I mean, it will be a little more strict than state law is. Will it help? it's all about the enforcement that you have now.
Okay, so that
when
leads
we
me to my
get-
next question.
Yeah, when you look at state law or just other ordinances that may apply, for instance, downtown, are they in a park after hours? Are they, is there blocking of sidewalks and traffic? Just things of that nature where there are other ordinances that could apply as well.
Okay, so with a number of comments we actually heard earlier and ones that we already know from budget discussions with so many unfilled positions in the police department. Is this something we are going to be able to enforce? I'm all about having tools in the toolbox. I just want to make sure that, because one of the main points I believe that Councilwoman Coonrod wanted to make sure is that we're not arresting these kids.
Mhm.
We are helping to get them someplace safe, which is a resource, which is time. And I want to make sure that we're going to be able to do that, because having this on the books and not having that resource to ensure that we're getting them somewhere safe, I don't know that we're going to have that positive effect.
Well, of course, curfew violation is a status offense. So that's not something we're going to make a full custody arrest on. I mean, the state law even says the officer should try to drive them home, find their parent, find out the reasons why they're, I think they use the word incorrigible, thing. And so we, in the past, again, working with juvenile court, we've worked with Judge Filial, and we've set up ways in which we can just issue a citation, make it simple where he chooses to have those heard by a referee, and they have a sit down with the parents. I think much like Councilwoman Coonrod had suggested, is bringing the parent involved, and they tend to do that.
Okay, great.
That's a goal that I think Judge Filial has always worked with us.
Yeah, I just think it's really important to be clear that we will have, and we do intend to bring resources CPD related in a case where this actually does come into effect, that we are taking those steps to get that minor home safe and have that conversation. I think that would definitely prove the positive point that Councilwoman Coonrod
Sure.
was trying to do with this.
And I very much am in agreement. We've got to bring the parents into play with this problem. We can't just drop our kids off in a certain area of town, say, here you go. Because you know what? When I was 14, 15, I made some pretty bad decisions. And that's just being young. Our brains aren't developed yet. So, we have to have these conversations with those parents and set, some expectations. So.
Great. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Councilwoman Dotley.
Yes, my question for Chief Tucker is, I know what's mentioned, the students, youth loitering downtown and different things. So can you elaborate on issues that have occurred in the downtown area or any area for that matter, pertaining to teens and youth during after hour times?
Well, you brought up downtown. I do have a little data, just a little snapshot of from June 1st to September 1st. Looking at calls for service, any call type of juvenile that was where it was mentioned in the narrative directed toward that, made up for 0.94% of calls for service. So wasn't as great as we might think it is. It's not a very large number. If that kind of helps with that question, does that answer?
Yeah, it actually answered my second question, because I was going to ask about the actual data. So you're saying that the calls for service between June 1st and September 1st that related to juveniles downtown was 0.94%?
Yes, that's what we were able to find.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just a follow-up. I think when I heard Vice Chairman Smith, did we get the full ordinance in our packet in the link, or could we get a copy of the full ordinance, because I must admit, I didn't see all of the exceptions as well. I think that would be important for us to look through when we're making a decision. Thank you.
Right. Councilwoman Hill.
Thank you, Chair. So Chief, 0.94% of calls were related to juveniles. How many times did you have officers driving folks home based on the curfew ordinance?
I don't have that information.
Okay.
That wasn't mine. So, but I would say few,
Few.
very few.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. I can't speak just a couple of things that happened downtown, but our parks that's downtown, as we all know, is, you know, in our ordinance that Coolidge Park kids can't be at Coolidge Park after 6 o'clock unattended. Anyway, so that addresses the downtown part. Again, it goes back to the parents being responsible. It was all over the news and people came to city council and talked about how young teenage boys pulled out a gun and just rapidly unloaded. And people were running and trying to dodge the bullets to prevent from being shot. Somebody got grazed, Councilman Bird's son almost got shot. Like, it's things like that that I'm more concerned of with the crime in our neighborhood, just outside of the parks in downtown. I'm also concerned with all our parks. I'm concerned about, you know, the things that are happening in our community. And I want to make this clear that this piece of legislation isn't a drive or to be racial or to target specific Black kids, because in my neighborhood, when you come outside after a certain, when the sun go down, you now see poor white kids involved in different activity in our neighborhood, to include prostitution. So it's again, it goes back to parental guidance. It goes back to the responsibility of our parents. What parent want their kid walking up and down the street at 11 o'clock at night or at midnight? We parents have the responsibility of taking care of their kids until they become the age of an adult. That's the role of a parent. I mean, unless I'm mistaken what that role may be as a parent. But again, we have these laws in place and ordinance in place for a reason. And it's a preventive measure for our kids to, you know, for them to be responsible too, to come in the house. And like you stated yourself, like back then, we knew to be in the house. Parents made sure that their kids were in the house. It was known at this, but when these street lights come on, we need you in the house. So now we get it, it's a different age, but again, if we're not making it clear that this is the law at whatever time we say fit, maybe these times may not be a good time that I've come up with. But if council can come up and agree with a time that kids should be in the house, I mean, we just need to, you know, think about what's the best for our city. But when we continue to have our constituents in our neighborhoods that complain about certain activity that's happening, and yet we want to continue to sweep it up under the rug or put another Band-Aid on it and not address it, we're still stepping over bodies in our neighborhoods. Our seniors are still afraid to come outside. Businesses want to close their doors and move because of certain things that's happening in our neighborhoods. Then when we get into the conversation of Black flight, why are they leaving from in certain areas? Because of the things that are happening. Now, I spoke with Judge Phil, y'all, and even in his voice and in his eyes, like the plea of help, when you have 17-year-old young girls that are in prison, in jail, waiting at the juvenile facility to be tried as an adult. When you have a 14-year-old boy, young boy, that's in juvenile waiting Like, it's those kind of things that I'm concerned about. Had we had something going on where they understand and parents really understand the urgency of your child needs to be in the house. You need to be watching your kid. Like, those are things, it sounds like it's simple to do, and I get it. And most parents, working 2-3 different jobs, or they have the latchkey kid, but it's okay. But it's when it's time for us to provide those services that we often talk about. And that's the whole point of this legislation. If we can keep kicking the can down the road, but when it's near and dear to your heart, the next time something happens because it was outside of this curfew, you will think about it in a more rational way. But it's happening and it affects my community. It affects Bird's community. It affects our community more than some of my colleagues here, because a lot of the stuff that happens is not talked about from a media perspective in their community. But these same actions are harming their communities too. So that's all I got to say about it.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And Chief Tucker, in talking to, I also spoke with Judge Filiard, and he explained to me that we've tried this before. And the people that run Y Camp also put up money and time and bodies to say, hey, we will accept kids. But they were never able to receive kids. They had people there ready to work, but officers didn't bring kids to them. So I thought that was a tragedy. Another thing, Judge Filiard said that he was even willing to see if he can't arrest or put someone in juvenile for breaking curfew. I think you just mentioned that. But if it was a holding situation, because when my son almost got shot downtown while he was at work, it was some teenagers out there fighting and playing with guns. He said that, the officers out there explained that once we get this child, if the mother is out somewhere and we can't get in touch with them, you have another officer off the street. I say this time and time again, you cannot legislate morals and values. You can't, no matter what we do. But once again, as a city, we need, it's too many smart people in our city. We need to figure something out, because these kids are getting older and they all have guns. You just seen what happened at the mall. I mean, I was there too, and bullets flying over my head. It's hard to imagine Chattanooga in the next 10 years if we don't do something right now. So I would like to get a slow maybe instead of a fast no when it comes to a lot of the operations and accountability when it comes to this piece of legislation. If it was to go through, even with Neil Pinkston, talking to him, we have to figure out a way to bring him into the fold to see what we can do to also maybe even holding the parents accountable. That we have to push the envelope and not just sit back and keep thinking things will work itself out, because Chattanooga is going to go down a spiral that is going to be unethical for all of us and in a bad place if we don't address this situation. Councilman Ken Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just one follow-up, Chief. In thinking through this and some of the examples that I've heard as far as some of our youth that may be out on the street after curfew, does this in any way allow an officer to stop a youth or several youths that are just walking down the street at nighttime with the assumption that they may be breaking curfew, with the assumption of their age?
I think we have to be careful there. A consensual encounter, there's nothing wrong with that. An officer pulling up and going, hey, go over the age of, and, so we want to be careful not to just line people up and shake them down. But if there's reason to believe they are breaking it, yeah, we'll stop them. And, we have that authority to do so.
Okay, I guess the careful part is definitely something I wanted to bring up.
Sure.
I in no way would want to infringe on somebody's rights to walk down the street just because it's after hours, regardless of how young they may look. or the fact that maybe they don't have their ID and can't prove that they're over the age. So, okay, again, I fear some unintended consequences of rights here, and I just want to make sure that, to your point, we are being very careful with that. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chair.
Man, Councilwoman Coonrod.
Councilman Smith, that was a great point. But I also think it goes back to our community policing. And Chief Fletcher, he changed the culture of our police department with that. But community policing also, gets them involved and engaged in the neighborhood that they're patrolling. So the kids that are in that neighborhood. And if they're getting off work and walking, and I'm sure they still got their uniform on, but I in no way want this to be like a targeted thing, and that a lot of people are concerned about, like, let's get this kid, he's Black, he's walking out the curfew hour, so let's target him. No, that's not the intention of this legislation. But it does, it also will teach our kids, how to be more responsible. It teach them responsibility, self-control, time management skills, along with the parental accountability. But we also, more than often, always say out of our mouth that we can't legislate morals and values. I beg to differ, because we legislated prostitution. That's a moral. That's something that but if we could legislate that, we should be able to legislate other things as well. So that's just where I stand with it.
All right. Thank you, Councilwoman. So I seeing no more questions. I think at this time would be a good time to ask the question. Are we ready to put this on the agenda? Do you think we need more discussion? And I'll leave that up to the body. You ready to move forward? So I think, do we have to have a vote to move forward with this, put this on the?
Just ask if there's any objections. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Is there anyone opposed to putting this on the agenda at this time in this form right now? Councilwoman Coonrod?
Thank you. I just wanted to say really quickly, if we could get, because Councilman Lefford asked if we can get all the other additional provisions so people know that it's still in there, like those things.
All right.
And then outside, and I think the city attorney said she was gonna do that. And
Okay.
other than that, I'm ready to move forward.
And I don't see anyone saying that they are opposed. So Nicole, can we get this on the 2-week agenda? 2-week agenda? Thank you so much, ma'am. Seeing no more questions, seeing that we have no more business to take up at this time, I say that we are adjourned to 6 o'clock.